So this just happened about 2 hours ago. I'm pretty shaken up. To give a little background, I'm a film student in college right now, and me and my buddies are always trying to find new locations to film our movies at. I make horror films, so all the places I'm looking for and exploring are abandoned. And tonight, me and my group of friends, there were 10 of us total, decided to check out this abandoned hospital down the street from our school. They had been there before and said it was a great spot for filming, and I should check it out. Tonight was that night. So when we get there, I have my Nikon DSLR out with a handheld LED light attached to the top of the camera to scout the place out when we get inside. I didn't film any of the encounter because I usually only film the inside of these places, but I had my camera and light out to shine the way through. I was leading the way down this narrow path that led to these walls that we had to climb to get on the roof of the place, where we would access one of the rooms to get inside the building. Because I was carrying my camera and bag, I was trying to look for another way up. So I walk a little further down this narrow path, and I start noticing a lot of clothes and random shoes and cardboard boxes lying around the area. There was even an empty sleeping bag. That's when I knew that we probably weren't alone and were likely going to run into someone if we made the wrong move. And boy, did we ever. One of my friends walking behind me down this path notices a door to my right. It's closed, and my guess was that it was locked and not worth trying. But he already has his hand on the door handle and starts tugging. I look over, and it barely cracks open, but something is holding it from the inside. I shine my LED on the inside, and I see a shirt tied to the inside of the door handle to another part of the room, acting as a lock. But my friend, being the way he is, tugs again and rips the shirt right off, and the door swings open. Inside, there is someone sleeping on like a table or a couch, alongside with a group of terrifying looking people sitting by a light inside that room, and they all stop and stare at us. In the short glimpse that I got, my friend yells, "Oh shit, get the fuck out of here," and slams the door and just bolts past me. I was standing there a little shaken, almost feeling like I should apologize, but I just follow him instead. My other 8 friends are already on the roof at this point. They ask what's going on, and we just run for our lives out of the area. I hear the door in the path swing open, but I couldn't look back. From there, me and my friend rendezvous back to a higher part of the area, away from any entrance leading to the hospital. There is a small gap that you could jump across to get to one of the roofs of the buildings that my other friends were on. About 4 of them follow us and jump across, ready to get out of there. But the others stay on the roof and watch us, stuck like statues. I look at them, confused at what they're staring at, and I begin to hear this metal dragging on the concrete. I turn around, and there's this crazy looking man, maybe mid-20s, dragging a baseball bat with nails along the end, walking towards us as he drags the bat along the concrete, acting just like Negan from The Walking Dead. My heart sinks. At this point, I turn off my light and all that's shining is the moonlight. I keep my hand on my pocket knife, desperately trying to think of anything to do if he starts swinging. But I knew there was no way I would come out alive if I tried anything. Plus I gotta take care of my camera. So he walks closer to us, and the first thing he says is, "You're gonna want to keep that light off." And everyone is silent. I am practically shaking. He then starts circling around us, and he says, "You guys are never gonna come back here, right?" He walks past me and sees the camera, and raises his bat saying, "And you're gonna put the fucking camera away." And I just barely say, "Yeah, it's off." He looks over to my friends watching on the roof, past the gap, and he points to them and he says, "Jump." And they stand silent. The guy says again, "Fucking jump across right now. Just run and jump. You'll make it." Keep in mind the gap doesn't look that bad, but the drop is fatal if you don't make the jump. And my 4 friends are all staring down at the drop, fearing what could happen. One of them says, "I don't think I can make it." And the Negan guy replies, "Run and jump, or else you're gonna regret it." So my friend steps back, runs, and barely makes the jump. From there, one by one, the other 3 make the jump across, all while the Negan guy is standing right behind us with his bat, dragging it along the concrete. Once we all got across, he says to us, "You're never coming back here again. You understand?" And we awkwardly apologize and run away back to our cars in the distance. I get in my car and look back at the area, and he's still standing there, watching us with his bat as we speed off. Realistically, we could have probably ganged up on him as a group if anything bad happened, but who knows who else was back there. Sadly, the hospital is a no-go from here on out, but I'll still be looking around for some sick locations. What scared me the most about this was how fearless and disturbed the guy looked. He'd definitely seen some shit and had undoubtedly used that bat before on someone else. He looked like a killer. He was a killer. And it was his calmness that really got to me. Definitely a lesson learned, but regardless, let's not meet again, Negan guy. Abandoned buildings are amazing. My mother studied historical preservation in Georgia, so a love of dilapidated and abandoned structures is in my blood. When you pair this interest with my love of photography, you have a match made in heaven. And fortunately, this pairing is seen as favorable by many of my friends as well. As a rule, I never enter an abandoned place by myself. This has a lot less to do with caution or fear. As a stocky, bearded 22-year-old male, I don't often fear for my safety, but it's primarily for physical safety reasons. When a structure has been left to rot for X number of years, there's a decent chance that you could go through the floor if you're not careful. Where I live, in southwestern Ohio, there are a great many exploration opportunities to be found, especially if you take 15 minutes to cross into Indiana. In Richmond, on one of the main strips before you hit the center of the city, there is a massive hospital that has been abandoned since the early 2000s. I had known about the location for ages, as my grandfather had stayed there during his battle with lung cancer. Last year, I finally found the time and the energy to drive up with my friend Luke to check it out. We got there around 2 p.m., which gave us roughly 2 hours before dusk would begin. For pictures and for safety, we had agreed that daylight was a must for this expedition. Upon entering the hospital, it became immediately clear that we were far from the first people to ever visit. The entire place had been gutted, and there was graffiti everywhere. The walls sporting comforting phrases like, "We're watching you," and "Leave my house now." The bulk of the trip was uneventful. We got some great shots and covered some of the primary hospital wings, steering clear of the psych wards and cancer centers. As we gradually made our way up the stairwell to each new floor, we began to notice a pattern. At each landing, there was a door, and each door had been propped open by a massive wedge of cement or other debris. The doors were shockingly heavy, so we assumed roving graffiti artists and vandals had opted for easier floor access. Granted, it seemed odd, but we didn't think much about it until we were on the 7th floor. I was in one of the old bedrooms getting a shot of some curtains while Luke stood in the doorway. Suddenly, a massive sounded from the stairwell we had came from, causing Luke and I to jolt upright. It sounded like it had come from below us, like one of the doors had suddenly slammed. The problem was that none of the doors could have slammed, at least not on their own. Not only were they separated from the doorframe by massive chunks of debris, but they were far too heavy to have caught wind. The only way a door could have slammed was if someone had stood back, held it fully open, and then let go. Not a behavior that one would normally engage in without purpose. After a few seconds of staring at each other with saucer eyes, we decided it was time to go. This meant finding another way down, as our previous way was currently occupied by someone. There were these little green arrows spray painted all over the building, and on a gut decision, we decided to try and follow them. The ones on this floor all had the word exit written above them, so we felt good about it. It wasn't until we had been following the arrows for 5 minutes or so that we realized that wherever they were taking us, it wasn't out of the building. In our fear and desire to leave as quickly as possible, we had neglected to realize that the arrows were taking us deeper into the center of the building. Windows were becoming less frequent. Everything was darker, and everything was damp. That was the weirdest part, how damp everything was. We had gone from a destroyed but dry building into an area that was so wet and rife with mold that the walls and floors were going greenish brown. We never found out what was at the end of the path, or who was leading or pushing us there. After turning back, we found an emergency exit in the corner of the end of the hallway we were able to climb down and escape from. We never saw anyone, but we're sure they saw us. The hospital was mostly windows, which means that literally anyone looking out would have been able to see us coming and going. I'm glad we didn't go further into the dark, wet areas. Who knows what would have been awaiting us there, but surely it wouldn't have been anything good. The door, the spray paint directions, it all seemed too sinister and intentional to be anything like an innocent vandal's prank. The entire time we were following the arrows, something just felt off. The hair was up on my neck, and I was frankly terrified. So, whoever decided to stalk us and trap us in this abandoned hospital, let's not meet ever. I love to explore the abandoned Titan nuclear bases in Colorado. I have already had a few really terrifying experiences down there. Here's 3 or 4. The first experience I had, we were held up at gunpoint. While at the end of a really long, dark tunnel, we saw a light at the other end. As to not scare the shit out of anyone, we try to make our presence known when we see other explorers. We yelled down the tunnel, and they yelled back, telling us that they were coming to us. When they got there, they all had guns. 3 in total. One had a shotgun, and the other 2 small pistols. They told us to drop all of our gear, including lights and phones, and to step away. Not wanting to die in an abandoned silo, we complied. They took everything we had and slowly backed away, guns still drawn. I know the place pretty well because I go down there a lot, but getting out in the pitch black was very nerve-wracking and dangerous. If it was anyone else but us, since we knew this place inside and out, they most likely would have seriously injured themselves or even died. In this complex are missile silos that go 10 stories into the ground. Most of them are filled up with water and other nasty shit. Around the sides of these silos are old pipes and air ducts hanging off the walls. Being the dumb guys we are, we like to climb on them to get to the otherwise inaccessible rooms. My buddy held the light for myself and one other. As we climbed, my friend lost his footing and fell about 30 feet into the water below. He didn't surface for about 15 seconds. The 15 longest seconds of our life. He was able to grab some pipes and climb up to us as we helped him out. He left everything he had, besides his pants and shirt there, because we didn't know what all could be in that water. He had cut his leg pretty bad on something in the water, and we rushed to a hospital. We got there in time to get the cut cleaned, and luckily it did not get infected. We did not tell them we were exploring the silos. We told them he fell at a construction site. I know this was probably stupid, but we didn't want to get in trouble. He got a really bad cold for the next few weeks. We like to take people down there who have never seen it and give them tours. We even mapped it out and studied the history of it to give them a real cool experience. We were taking a few girls down there. In total, there were 6 of us. We got down into one of the main rooms from which there are multiple tunnels branching off. Right at the entrance to the tunnel that led to the silos, there was a hatch door that had broken off the wall and was laying on the ground. There was a decent-sized puddle of blood on it. We touched the blood with gloves on, and it could not have been more than a few hours old. There were splotches of blood leading away from the puddle. The most unnerving part was that it led deeper into the complex, not out of it. We, being the idiots we were, decided to follow it. It led to one of the silos that did not have much water in it. It dropped about 50 feet into the ground before being too dark to see. The blood was covering the ledge right next to the drop, the rope that chained the drop off, and a bunch of the pipes on the walls. We looked all over for the source, hoping that no one was injured. We couldn't find anything, so we noped the fuck out of there real quick. I went down there alone once, and only once. Adjacent to the circular silos are these circular rooms that are 3 stories with each floor connected by a ladder. Outside of one of the rooms was a bunch of water filling a tunnel. Something about this water was off. It was much darker and seemed to be more still than any of the other water there. You would drop things in it and through a greenish haze see them ever so slowly sink to the bottom. Sometimes just staying suspended above the ground by whatever the fuck nasty chemicals are in the water. Inside the room on the top floor was this huge demonic painting. It depicted a girl with her ribcage exposed and her organs falling out, forming the head of another girl below with arrows going through her. There were goat skulls and all sorts of creepy shit. I went there alone just once. I sat in that room in the pitch black for about an hour and just listened to the silence. The vibes I got were fucking crazy. Nothing really happened, but I had never felt more hopeless, alone, or scared in my entire life. One of my favorite activities is exploring old, abandoned buildings. I've seen quite a few strange things during these trips, but one experience still creeps me out to this day. A few years ago, I found a long-forgotten water refinery through the help of online exploration communities and Google Earth. Although it's stupid, I always go to the places for the first time alone, partly for the thrill, and partly because if something bad were to happen, I would feel terrible having brought someone else into that situation. So, I make plans to head there the next day after my class is let out. The day of the trip, I pack up my camera and water bottle and set off following my hand-drawn map, the downside of not having a printer. After an hour or 2 of biking, I finally arrive at the place, which luckily had an old bike path dead-ending just past it. It was completely overtaken by vegetation, with trees growing up through and around the buildings. Not to mention that the actual buildings were just disintegrating, with paint peeling off every wall and ceiling. I took my time, scouring each of the buildings, looking around for anything interesting. I found hundreds of broken windows, weird broken spheres, and some kind of giant oven. After an hour or two of successful exploring, I decided to head off happy with an SD card full of pictures. Soon after, I pulled my bike back out through the hole in the fence I entered and started biking away. I remembered there was one last shot I wanted to get. I'm pretty insistent on getting the shots I want, and I didn't know if I would ever come back. So I decided to just tough it out, ride back and take the picture. As I was going back, I saw a lone man dressed in old clothes, walking down the bike trail away from the dead end. I thought it was kind of a strange path for someone to take a walk on, and something in me said, "Don't let him see you go in there." I biked past him and gave him a slight head nod and figured I'd bike all the way to the end of the trail, turn around, and by the time I got back, he'd be long gone. Having continued in the opposite direction, I leisurely take my time, get to the end, and turn around. As I head back towards the hole in the fence, I see him there, staring at me, and walking back toward the dead end from which he came. He had a happy look on his face, but it wasn't the kind of happiness that made me feel at ease in any way. The best way I could describe it is he looked like he had just been told a very dirty joke and was trying to contain it. I knew I had to do something, and I was literally trapped between him and a dead end. I decided to play it cool once more, but be ready to drop everything and run if things got hairy. As I get closer and closer to him, I can see his facial expression clearer. And it's not someone I want to be in the same state with, let alone the same bike path with. I'm silently cursing myself out for going back for one picture. As I slowly get closer, finally, I'm about 20 feet away from him, and he calls out, "I sure would like a ride. It's so hot out. Mind if I jump on?" As soon as I hear this, I realize this is no longer my brain falsely interpreting something as creepy. I pick up speed and rush past him, putting as much space between us as I can. Now long behind me, I see that he's once again turned and is following me. At this point I bolt, sprinting down the bike path back onto the road. Interestingly, I stop at a nearby gas station on the way home to get a refill on my Gatorade. I see a cop there and told him I just rode down the old bike path by this park. He looked at me, sort of bewildered as to why a person would ride out there, or at least that was what I guessed from behind his sunglasses, and he told me he didn't recommend people going there, especially alone, as some shady characters like to hang out there. I wish I could say I stayed away, but I went back one other time with a girl, and had a completely different, but almost as creepy experience.